Well, it does highlight that the point of this discussion or this meeting was not to ease tensions or solve problems. All the problems that existed yesterday will still exist tomorrow. This meeting was to try to prevent an escalation, to prevent the current problems escalating out of hand, and to your point, Xi Jinping's warnings in particular were about Taiwan, saying that if the Taiwanese, quote, independence forces, unquote, should cross the red line, then China would be forced to take drastic action, in Xi Jinping's words. So in return, Joe Biden reassured Xi Jinping that the US would continue to observe its existing one China policy, that its recognition was to Beijing as the sole legitimate government of China, not to Taiwan, and to signal that he didn't want to see any further escalation of this problem either. So that really was the primary aim of this meeting, to prevent the Taiwan tension point becoming a Taiwan flashpoint, possibly escalating into an all-out war. So that seems to have been achieved with mutual assurances on either side of the pre-existing positions.
But then does that give China the right to aggressively pursue Taiwan and to try and bring them back into the fold?
Well, no, aggressively pursue it does not. The Americans have been clear that they don't want any use of force against Taiwan. They have been arming and equipping Taiwan for decades, but that they don't want to see a destabilization across the Taiwan Straits, nor a destabilization of the regional balance. So that's the American position. And the Chinese position is that they don't intend to use force against Taiwan unless there is a provocation from the Taiwanese side, which they normally nominate as being a formal declaration of independence from an island which is de facto independent anyway in the way it operates.
But at the same time, we've talked about this before, they're flying regular sorties across Taiwan, intimidating Taiwan, continually asserting that Taiwan is part of mainland China. What could turn this back into a flashpoint? What precedent would there be for the US to try and defend Taiwan?
Well, you're right. There have been continuing pressings of the envelope from both sides. So, for example, last week there was a delegation of US Congress members visited Taiwan, in response to which the Chinese military staged a series of maneuvers near the Taiwan Straits. Just yesterday, the Chinese military Southern Command announced that it had conducted a series of night bombing raids in the ocean off Hainan Island between China and Taiwan. So all of this has been going on. Now, what we don't know, we've been given readouts from the two sides, which are just a summary of, they had more than 3 hours of discussion, and they give us a few paragraphs to summarize. What we don't know, but well may have been contained in this agreement, is some sort of concord that any further escalation from either side, either US increased assurances to Taiwan or Chinese physical provocations of Taiwan, will be halted. I guess we'll see that. The evidence will be in developments on the ground in the next weeks. But if that doesn't happen, if they don't stop the current rate of escalation on both sides, that also will soon be in evidence, and it will resume its trajectory to becoming what The Economist magazine has called the most dangerous place on earth, Taiwan.
Which then brings us to Australia's positioning, and in recent days it would seem that the government is throwing its weight behind whatever the US decides to do. You've written about this. Should there not be some form of public discussion about whether Australia should be tying ourselves to the US, should there be any military conflict?
Yes, this was a striking development on the weekend, where Peter Dutton gave an interview to The Australian where he said that it was, quote, inconceivable, unquote, that Australia would not join the US in any action to defend Taiwan should it be attacked by the Chinese mainland. So for the Defence Minister, a member of the Cabinet, as well as a member of the National Security Committee of the Cabinet, to use such strong language in a policy area which until now has been very carefully ambiguous to neither encourage Taiwan to sudden moves to independence nor to provoke Beijing into doing anything preemptive to try and grab hold of it. That is a huge change. Now, it doesn't have any formal standing. The government hasn't made a policy decision on this. This does not reflect, according to officials and cabinet ministers I've spoken to in the last 24 hours, this does not reflect a formal position or decision within the government. It's Peter Dutton's view. However, Taiwan policy is an extremely delicate area, and it puts now Australia, thanks to the Dutton comments, in the same rank, the front rank of nations which seem to be indicating that they would be prepared to use force of arms to defend Taiwan against any Chinese attack, in the front rank with the US and Japan. The US, Japan, and now Australia this year have said in nominally unofficial comments from Joe Biden in the American case, from Taro Aso, the Japanese Deputy Prime Minister in Japan's case, and now from Peter Dutton, Defence Minister in Australia's case, they've all said pretty much the same thing, which is that although this is not a formal position of government, we stand ready and would be committed to defending Taiwan if it came to a war. So this has been, for Australia to now join that front rank of countries making that unofficial yet very meaningful pronouncement, is a big development. As you've just hinted at, Bev, there has been no debate within the Australian Parliament about this policy. There hasn't been really any widespread community discussion about this at all. I'd be surprised if many Australians knew just how serious the situation was, much less agreed to the concept of Australia joining any military action. So it's really a development that's come out of a very untilled field into rather full bloom very quickly, and that's going to take a lot of people by surprise. It's produced threats, of course, as you'd expect from the Chinese propaganda machine, and it's got attention worldwide, and Australia now has been identified around the world as one of the 3 countries that would use force of arms to defend Taiwan if the US should defend it from a Chinese attack.
And perhaps a little premature for us to have cast that position, considering what's happened in the talks today. Great to talk. Thanks, Peter.
Pleasure, Bev.